All right, welcome to the 2020 virtual think tank of the National Institutes of Historically Underserved Students. Introducing WVU Parkersburg's president, Dr. Chris Gilmer.
Good afternoon, everyone. Quite literally, four time zones that I'm aware of, possibly even more. And in addition to the wonderful students and their mentors that I have with me in the Zoom room, we have delegates of the National Institutes for Historically Underserved Students watching us from YouTube. And they represent 24 states and the District of Columbia. This is going to be an auspicious afternoon. I want to welcome Betty Knighton, the president of the National Issues Forums and a member of the board of directors of the West Virginia Center for Civic Life. Those two organizations are co-sponsoring with us today, but mostly I want to welcome the students from our institutions who are going to be the stars of this afternoon. We thank all of the sponsors of the National Institutes, all of whom will be recognized publicly at Saturday morning's closing event. I thank my colleague presidents of Adams State University, a Hispanic serving university in Colorado, Dr. Cheryl Lovell. Alcorn State University, a historically Black university in Mississippi, Dr. Felicia Nave. Santa Gleska University, a tribal university in South Dakota, Dr. Lionel Bordeaux. And Tougaloo College, a historically Black college in Mississippi, Dr. Carmen J. Walters. Their students are joining West Virginia University at Parkersburg students and Appalachian University in West Virginia. Finally, I want to thank the WVUP community for being supportive of the National Institutes, and I want to thank my excellent team. At this point, I would like to recognize Betty Knighton, president of the National Issues Forums, to offer a greeting.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gilmer. I'm so glad to be here with you today. I'm joining you from my home in Charleston, West Virginia. I'm so thrilled to be connected with you from all around the country. I want to tell you just a little bit about what National Issues Forums are. The component parts really are people, public issues, and a set of practices. And the people who are involved in national issues forums all around the country are those who believe that it's important to bring people together who have different points of view to think together and talk together about the impact of issues on our lives. So those people are you, people who are willing to participate and people who are willing to organize opportunities like this. The public issues are ones that impact our health, our economy, our well-being, our relationship with each other, and all the things that allow us to have successful and productive lives in this country. So there's a whole range of issues that are part of National Issues Forums, and I'm really very, very delighted that today we're focusing on the very important issue of racial justice in this country. And then the practices. The practices are based on the idea that we need to be able to listen to different perspectives, to understand the experiences of different people, and to be able to see if there are ways that we can weigh different approaches to addressing public issues that allow us to set directions together to improve our lives in our community, our states, and all across the country. National Issues Forums prepares support materials from a very nonpartisan basis to allow this kind of, to support these kinds of discussions. And those are some of the materials that we'll be using today in a set of questions that promote deliberation, the weighing that I was talking about of these issues. I so admire the work of the National Institutes for Historically Underserved Students and the fact that they've prioritized this discussion as part of this important national gathering that happens annually. And I deeply appreciate Dr. Chris Gilmer and his leadership. I'm so glad he's a fellow West Virginian, and that this work is something that helps to build connections across the country. These discussions usually happen in campuses or in communities. And on a special day like today, we're connecting people across borders in order to be able to meet and talk to people they normally wouldn't have a chance to meet and talk with on an issue that's important to us all. Mainly, I just want to hear from you and listen and learn. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Betty. And before I yield to our moderators, I want to do two things. I want to tell you why this conversation is so important, and I want hopefully to establish my moral right to convene a conversation such as this. I grew up a gay child and became a gay man in the state of Mississippi, a very conservative place. I lived most of my life as a person who dealt with issues of obesity and was bullied for that my whole life. I grew up a product of multi-generational poverty, and I know what it's like to be poor. I know what it's like to be teased for the clothes that you wear or the car that you drive to school in. I know what it's like to be a first generation college student who has no culture of higher education in your family and therefore not as many people to support you as other students have. This is what I know about prejudice from a personal basis. There's a word that is often said against gay people, and I won't say it here today, but you all know it. I've heard it many times in my life, most recently, just a few months ago, in my own backyard. I never try to hide anything that I am, but I never pretend to be anything that I'm not. So, having shared my story with you, I also want you to know that I realize that my ancestors were not brought here against their will on slave ships. My mother and her children were not separated from each other at the US Mexico border, and my ancestral lands were not stolen from my ancestors. So, as I said, I want you to understand why the topics of prejudice might be so important to me, but I don't want to claim and I don't want you to think that I'm claiming any kind of a right that I don't have. I also want you to understand that I wanted this to be a student led conversation because I believe the greatest unintended arrogance of American higher education is that the student voice, the most important voice, is also the one that is most often overlooked and most often left out of the conversation. I assure you that will not happen here today. Finally, I want to challenge our student participants to do one thing for me. It's brave of you to be here to talk about this difficult topic. And I want you to tell your story with honesty and integrity. I also, however, invite you to be mutually respectful of positions that might be different than yours on the subject. We live in a world in which the so called adults and the so called leaders, the group that I fall into, have failed miserably at having civil dialogue with each other about important topics. But I have confidence in the young people of this nation that you're going to be able to do something here today that the so called adults and leaders have failed at and not been able to do. And with that, I'm so excited to get started, and I yield to our moderators, who for today will be Dr. Stephen Smith, Vice President of Enrollment Management and CEO of the Jackson County campus of West Virginia University at Parkersburg, and Dr. Tori Jackson, Vice President for Institutional Advancement and CEO of the WVU at Parkersburg Foundation, who will set the expectations and introduce the panel for the rest of the day. Dr. Jackson.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank the institutions that are participating with us today, and I would like to recognize you, give you a chance to tell about your institution in 1 to 2 minutes, and then introduce to us your students who you have chosen to participate today. We will start with Dr. Ivan Banks, Professor of Education at Alcorn State University.
I keep forgetting that alphabetical order gets you right at the top of the list. I want to say also greetings from my university from Alcorn to give you some idea of who we are. Alcorn is the oldest public historically Black land grant institution in the United States, and it's the second oldest state-supported institution in the state of Mississippi. It was founded in 1871 as part of the efforts to educate the descendants of former enslaved Africans. The school was named in honor of James Alcorn, and it is pronounced Alcorn, and most people, that's how we know if you're not from Mississippi, if you say Alcorn. I kind of learned that the hard way, but it was named after James Alcorn, who was the sitting governor at that time. Alcorn is located on a beautiful campus, about 80 miles from the capital city of Jackson in the southwest quadrant of Mississippi in Claiborne County. I know that helps you a whole lot. The university typically enrolls about 4,000 graduate and undergraduate students in programs that lead to the associate, baccalaureate, master's degree, specialist, and now the doctoral degree. Alcorn students participate in more than 40 clubs and organizations, including which you often see on campuses: student government, student newspaper, yearbook, radio station, honor societies, Greek fraternities, religious groups, music, theater groups, student council, and a range of special interest groups. The university emphasizes intellectual development and lifelong learning through the integration of diverse pedagogies, applied basic research, cultural and professional programs, public service, and outreach, while providing access at the same time to globally competitive academic and research programs. I am proud of the students who are participating in this panel today. They truly represent future graduates who already exemplify the qualities of well-rounded leaders of high character who we fully expect will be successful in the global marketplace of the 21st century. Our student participants are, and I'm not sure, Marcelino Scott, and I do apologize, Marcelino, because I keep reversing your name and calling you Scott Marcelino. But Marcelino Scott, Amber Pittman, Jameisha Bernard, and Deshante Butler, and Avian Harding. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Banks, for sharing about Alcorn. I appreciate that. And I will now say it correctly.
Appreciate it.
Next, we would like for Jasmine Kampaneski, the project director for College Assistance Migrant Program at Adams State University, to share about that institution and her students.
Buenas tardes. Thank you for providing the safe space for today's conversation. Mi nombre es Jasmine Kampaneski y soy la directora de camp at ASU, the College Assistance Migrant Program at Adams State University. As one of 55 camp projects in the US, we support migrant and seasonal farm worker students in their higher education goals. Supporting those who feed us must always be at the forefront of our minds. 5 of our camp scholars will represent ASU in today's Student Speak series. We have spent much time over the past few days preparing for today, and what they have to say is powerful and needs to be heard. I say to Juan, Liz, Marlene, Juana, y Alejandro, thank you for allowing me to be an ally. Échale ganas. Further, I'm honored to have this opportunity to introduce Adams State University, Colorado's premier Hispanic serving institution. I've been a part of the ASU community for 4 years now, and I'm very proud of our efforts to grow from the concept of a Hispanic enrolling institution and towards embracing our identity as a Latinx and Hispanic serving institution. Much of this stems from the equity work our students, staff, and faculty engage in, the awareness programs such as CAMP and CASA, our multicultural center, foster through our programming, through the mission of our HSI Advisory Committee to educate, advise, and guide the Board of Trustees on the effective policies and best practices that support, promote, and celebrate the success of our Hispanic and Latinx students, and more. Collectively, we have a long way to go in our growth and learning, but there is a palpable realization that we must advance in our cultural competency as a campus community. And it's a great honor for me to be able to see that happen every day here on our campus. The students that will be representing us today, Marlene Garcia Araiza. She is a pre-med student, a junior, and she graduated with her associate's degree before graduating from high school. Alejandro Tovar Sosa. He is a recent graduate just here in May, a sociology major, and now he's the recruitment specialist for a camp project at Salisbury University. We like to grow our own. Liz Serna, a political science major and a senior, also secretary for our Model United Nations program. Juana Rodriguez Tarango, she's a business major and a sophomore. She's also one of our marketing interns. And Juan Calixto Tomas, he's a criminology major and is senior, about to graduate here in a month. So we're very proud of that accomplishment. Gracias a todos.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Dr. Daphne Chamberlain of the Associate Provost and Vice President of Academic Affairs at Tougaloo College.
Good afternoon. Again, I'm Daphne Chamberlain, and I serve as Associate Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs at historic Tougaloo College. And we would like to take this opportunity to thank the host institution for engaging us and inviting us to be a part of such an important conversation on racism and racial reconciliation. Tougaloo College was founded in 1869, and it was born out of the soil of a former slave plantation. And in addition, Tougaloo survived one of the most tumultuous periods in American history, the Jim Crow era. And during this particular period, Tougaloo College was a cradle for civil rights activism in Mississippi, but it also served as an incubator for student activism, which we still pride ourselves at. And since its inception, addressing social ills of the day have been embedded in Tougaloo's DNA. And the academic training that's provided to our students ensures their ability to be able to effectively address issues of health disparities, effectively go out and be wise legal counsel to those in need, effectively go into politics, but also provide quality education to children in Mississippi and beyond, be growers of our economy, and most certainly not least, Tougaloo College affords an academic training for our students that allows them to be servant leaders and be of service to those who are underserved and marginalized. So we are extremely excited to be a part of this conversation, but we are proud to have these two students participate in this conversation on racism and reconciliation. First, we have Mr. Marquise Hunt, who is a junior mass communication major from Portsmouth, Virginia. And we also have Mr. Jamil Johnson, who is a native of Jackson, Mississippi, and a senior economics major. And again, on behalf of the entire Tougaloo College family, we appreciate this opportunity and we look forward to many more. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we have Deborah Bordeaux, the Vice President of Student Services at Santa Galeska University.
Sorry, I didn't mute. I'm Deborah Bordeaux. I'm representing Santa Galeska University, which is located on the Rosebud Indian Reservation in South Central South Dakota. There are we are one of 37 tribal colleges throughout the country. Santa Galeska is Lakota for spotted tail, and that's where our university is named after a chief spotted tail. We are getting ready to enter in January our 50th year. Last year, Dene College was the first tribal college that had celebrated 50 years. Compared to these other schools that you're naming, we are relatively young. We have schools that are coming up behind us that are less than 50 years. Currently we have 1,000 students that are enrolled. And we have programs we have 9 certificate programs, 13 AA degrees. We offer 8 baccalaureate, and we have offer 2 master's degrees. And we are working on, it's a process, but one of our goals is to eventually get get into the doctoral level. The 4 students that we have representing us today are Cassandra Artichoker. She's an art major. Kashina One Star. She is also an art major. Deanne Oliver and Natisha Wagner, and both Deanne and Natisha are in the human services. So all 4 of these ladies are working towards their bachelor's in their major.
All right, thank you very much. And I have the privilege to recognize WVU Parkersburg. Again, my name is Tori Jackson, and people often say to me, can you tell me about WVU Parkersburg? And my answer is, it would be my privilege. We are welders, we are educators, we are nurses, we are IT professionals, we are electricians, we are law enforcers, we are business professionals, we are writers and communicators, we are first-generation students. We are from Appalachia and live among beautiful hills. We commute to campus. We experience 4 seasons. We bike, we hike, we are gamers, we are podcasters. Many of us work in addition to going to school. Many of us are Pell eligible. We are nearly 2,700 students strong, and we are approaching our 60th birthday. We go to college to better ourselves and our families. Most importantly, we are WVU Parkersburg proud. I would like to recognize two students who will be participating for WVU Parkersburg today, and that is Sarah Weeks and James Dobbs. They are both interns on the campus, and they both actually are in the Communication and Media Studies program. Dr. Smith, we can begin the questions. I will first say that if you would like to answer a question, if you look in the participants section at the bottom of your Zoom link, you can then click on raise hand once you click on the participants. And when a question is asked, if you would like to answer the question, students, please raise your hand on the participant panel and you will be called upon. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. First and foremost, let me congratulate and commend all of the young people who are actually participating in this program today. I think it's very important, it's very timely. Before we get into the question and answering phase of the program, we wanted to give you all an opportunity to talk to us about a time when you may have experienced racial injustice by way of discrimination or any other way that made you feel personally uncomfortable as it relates to who you were and the person that you were representing.
All right, let's start with Tougaloo College.
I'll yield to Jamil.
All right. Like Dr. Chamberlain said, I'm from Jackson, Mississippi, and if you know anything about Jackson, you know it's you can go days without seeing anybody not Black. And so I would say for the beginning of my life, I've always been aware of racism and white supremacy and all the ways it shows its head. And I've been hyper aware for most of my life, but one of my early personal experiences was in a Boy Scout troop I was in. It was pretty much all white. Me and my brother was the only two people who were Black in the troop. And it was one particular trip we were talking around a campfire, and we were just telling stories. And I told a story of how when I was younger, I had a bad bike accident. I busted my head. I was bleeding, and I really leaned into the drama when I was telling it. And I was talking about how my face was bleeding. I was running up to people's houses, just knocking on the doors, screaming, asking for help because I was just in so much pain and so scared. And granted, in the moment, it wasn't bad, but I'm telling this story. And one of the Boy Scouts' dads is like, you know, I wouldn't have let a brother, and this is a white guy. And he was particularly weird pretty much all the time I was around him, but he was like, I wouldn't have opened the door for a brother who's bleeding out his face knocking on my door. And I was probably 12 or 13 at that point, and I just kind of paused and kind of got back to the story. But that was one moment where it was like, if you see a bleeding kid beating on the door in any situation, it says a lot about you. If you look at them and like, oh, they're Black, I'm not gonna open the door. And so that situation right there taught me a lot. And it may not be the most important or most impactful racist situation I've encountered, but it stuck with me for years.
I think for me, my most, and I would say my most recent experience would have been last year. I was doing some lobbying with the United Nations Association on Capitol Hill. And of course, like most folks who are a part of any organization, people give out shirts so that you're able to be identified, that they know what group you belong to and things of that nature. But this particular time, I had just gotten my shirt, so I was the only one out in the group that didn't have one on. And so as we were making our way into the line to enter, security to go into the Capitol, there was a group of white men who were kind of standing off to the side a little bit. And, as normal, you just wouldn't necessarily think that they were standing in the line because they were off having their own conversation. So I got in the line. I was the only Black person in my group. And a Capitol police officer said, you need to go to the back of the line. And so I looked and I was like, for what? And she said, because there are people who are waiting in line. I said, but they're over there having a conversation. She said, you need to lower your tone. And I said, ma'am, I don't have a tone. And she said, you need to get rid of the attitude. And I was like, ma'am, I don't have an attitude. And so this white woman who was in my group, her name is Bonnie Worstel, stood in front of me and looked at this white police officer and told her, I don't necessarily think that what you're doing is necessary. And she said, well, I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to him. And so that moment alone, I think, was really just kind of like, for me, and similar to Jamil, I don't necessarily think it was necessarily like the most impactful, but I think alone just recognizing all of the issues of police brutality in this country, and how quickly certain instances can escalate, not knowing what the end result might be. And so, of course, we were able to get in after this childish back and forth between a law enforcement officer and myself who were trying to get inside of this building. But at the end of the day, I think that I recognized then that there needed to be some follow-up. And so that ultimately resulted in me having a meeting with the United States Sergeant at Arms, who of course filed an official report. And then the officer ended up getting, reprimanded for her actions because it was just quite unnecessary. But that was one of my experiences.
Well, thank you. Are there any other that would like to share?
Yes, I'm sorry, I was having technical difficulties, so I came in a little late. My name is Taylor Turnage, and I'm from Tougaloo College. I'm a senior biology major. And one of my most memorable experiences, people may think that it's not like a very important one, but it was a subtle one. And it was back when I was in 5th grade. I had worn Bantu knots for the first time to school. And like halfway during the school day, I was called to the principal's office, and they called my mother to come pick me up. And I actually got sent home due to the Bantu knots because they were saying that they were causing a disruption to other students in the classroom, students of Caucasian descent, because they had never seen Bantu knots before. And, they were talking about it in class and laughing about it in class. So I actually got sent home due to, their lack of knowledge of where Bantu knots came from and what they are. So that one sticks greatly in my mind due to the fact that I got reprimanded and got in trouble for trying to express a culture that I frankly, am so disassociated from due to the lack of representation at the time in America. So that one really sticks out greatly in my mind.
Taylor, thank you. Just for the edification of the group, do you mind describing what Bantu knots are?
Oh yes, Bantu knots are a hairstyle where your hair is like parted into different sections, and you have basically just balls. They look like knots, which is why they're called Bantu knots, around your head. So it's a very sort of eclectic look, but it does trace back to Africa.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to share?
Can we have Adam State go next?
Yeah, I was just going to quickly say, though, I see that Deshante has has their hand up.
Yes, or y'all going in order of colleges or just anyone?
You go ahead.
Okay, well, my experience, I remember from being, younger, and it's something that sticks with me. And my birthday was just yesterday. I'm 29 and I still remember it. But I was maybe 12 years old, and we had what was called AOL, if y'all remember. And, different teens could get on and chat with one another. So they have a thing where, I guess, to figure out, because we didn't have video and things like that, so you don't know what each person looked like. So they have a type of lingo where you describe pretty much who you are. So you would put B for black, F for female, things like that. So when I put my identification, and of course it was a black female, whoever the person was in the group, they immediately all started calling me N-words. saying anywhere, get out of here, anywhere, you shouldn't be here. And as a a young child, I was so afraid that I actually logged off the entire computer because I didn't know how, especially you've never seen me, you can't even hear me talk, and someone feels that type of way, in their heart over someone who they don't even know or can't even see. And as well as being discriminated as far as being a plus size woman. I worked at a correctional facility, and they wanted someone to take a photograph of what we should look like in our uniform. And I was pretty much told, I couldn't do it because I don't really fit the look that they were looking for. So those are things that I would say I've been discriminated against, skin color as well as being a fluffier individual.
Thank you. You guys, you can basically just speak. We don't actually have to go by the schools if you're more comfortable with that.
I'll go.
Thank you,
My name is Amber Pittman. I am from Alcorn State University, and growing up, I grew up in a majority white hometown, and my school was also majority white, and so there were a lot of instances where because of the color of my skin, I would be counted out a lot of times, or just that would put me in the category of an underdog, and I experienced it more in school than I thought I did outside of school because my parents try to shelter us from a lot of those experiences. But it was one that my parents couldn't shelter us from. We were just in a grocery store. It was me, my dad, my sister, and my brother. And this may have been maybe a month after the Trayvon Martin um, case had really gone viral, even though there had been several instances of, police brutality and things such as this, this was really the one that kind of shocked the world and brought it to the attention. And we were in the grocery store and we were just we were going through a list and arguing quietly, arguing about what our mom wanted us to get. And then all of a sudden, an older white male came up to us and he just started pushing us out of the way. And my dad said, "Oh, excuse me." And then he tried to group us all together and move us out of the way. And then he just kept ramming us with his cart. And then we were like, "Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse, like, are we in your way?" And then he didn't say anything. He just kept pushing us. And my dad said, "Excuse me, sir. You're touching my children. Like, can you move back?" He said, "You don't have the right to talk to me." And my dad, he looked at him and he looked at us like as though he wanted to regroup what he wanted to say before he said it in front of us. And he said, "Sir, I don't know what your problem is, but you can't touch my children. So please, we were right here, so you have to go around us." And the man told us that he was here first. We had no right to even say anything to him. And my dad, he got upset. I mean, this man was forcefully trying to go through his children and through him, and he got upset and he told him that he won't talk to him that way and that we were all in this country and we all have rights. And my dad, as he was saying this, someone went up to the front of the store and told the manager that my dad was causing confusion and he was trying to assault an old man. So the manager came back and told us we had to leave. And there was only one other person who saw this happening, and it was it was a Black lady, and she told the manager, "Sir, they weren't doing anything. This man just came up on them for no reason." And the manager said, "I'm sorry, but this is something, it's out of my hands. You all have to leave." And we had to leave. And we couldn't do anything there, but what my dad did, he brought us back to the house and we all sat down together and we all had this conversation about what was going on in our lives and how things like this shouldn't define us, but we should learn from it. But that was a situation that really opened my eyes to, because I've heard several stories. My parents are older, so I've heard several stories of, segregation and growing up in the South, there's a lot of different instances that they have had in their lives and their parents have had. So just seeing it for my own eyes, it really brought everything in perspective for me because I guess in a way I kind of thought that I wouldn't experience things like that, but I ended up having to. And my parents, they handled it very well when we were back at the house, and they really brought it into perspective for us. But that was a big thing for me that I still remember to this day.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Well, hello. My name is Marcelino Scott. I'm a senior at Alcorn State University majoring in psychology. My story is very brief, but it's meaningful. So one day when I was 14 years old, my friends and I, we went to a store called Academy, a sports store. Out of convenience, they was playing park ball at the time. So as we walk into the store, we notice how it's predominantly Caucasian, and we notice how we feel somewhat uncomfortable because where we come from is predominantly African American, but due to our schools, due to our parents taking us and putting us into another another region of where we was, it was predominantly Caucasian. So as we go in, we notice how everyone stops and they look at us. So as we walk around the store, specifically in the sports store, looking for things for football, different gloves and things, we notice how there's like a Caucasian male on one side of the room, a Caucasian male on the other side. They're following us each row. So due to us feeling uncomfortable, we decided that maybe we shouldn't be in this store because if you feel uncomfortable, you feel that you're being watched. It makes you cringy. So what we decided to do was leave. We didn't touch anything. We didn't steal anything. But before we could exit, we were stopped and they searched us. They said, "Where's your parents?" We said, "Well, we just came from school. We just walked down the street." And he said, "Well, okay, well, we're going to have to do a search on you because we believe there's a probability that you stole something." We felt that that was injustice, but at the time we didn't really know what injustice was. We heard of it, we've been introduced to it, but it wasn't necessarily approached by it ever like this before firsthand. So they caught us off guard. They searched us and they let us go and they told us that next time we come here, we meet our parents. I don't come back. So I just wanted to share that, and I feel like that was an injustice moment for us. It was profiling, stereotyping, and more so just inequality. Because I shouldn't have to feel like that in order if I want to go into the store and purchase merchandise for my sport or whatever I would like to do. So yes.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Are there other students who'd like to share with us as well from a different perspective?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Deanne Oliver, and I am a student, junior with Sinte Gleshka University, and my major is in human services with a concentration in chemical dependency. I wanted to share my story because I'm originally from New Mexico. I'm Dene, most of you know as Navajo tribe. I grew up in a rural, or I guess a border town of Gallup, New Mexico. So I was pretty much raised in Arizona and New Mexico. And I knew that there was a lot of inequalities around me. I've seen it, I've heard it, amongst my, in school growing up, because I did go to school in a border town that was predominantly Caucasian. It was very mixed, but we had a lot of Native populations. But I clearly remember this because I was a teenager and my parents and I went on a trip to Flagstaff, Arizona. And I always heard of, to be careful, to watch myself, be mindful of where you're at. And I didn't really think anything of it, being young, I was a little naive. So we went into a restaurant and we chose a Mexican restaurant that we wanted to eat at. So we sat there and the hostess sat us down. She was very friendly. And when it came to our server, we noticed that it was a young white lady who, you know, as soon as we got in and as soon as she knew that we were part of her table, you know, she kept looking at us and almost like she didn't want to wait on us. And I got that feeling from her. And, you know, my mom and my dad were being courteous, you know, raising their hands, saying, you know, can we get a server here? So after sitting there for 30 minutes, my father kept telling my mom, you know, calm down, somebody will come over here. And my mom, being the outspoken woman she is, you know, she got up respectfully, walked over and said, you know, we need a server. And one of the servers went over to the younger lady and just outright, she told her, I am not going to serve them. You're going to have to find somebody else. I am not going to serve them. And she just kind of looked at her surprisingly, and she's like, why not? You know, and when I heard them, I thought, who are you referring to as them? Because we're, as far as I'm concerned, we're all the same. So I sat there kind of clueless. And so the lady did serve us, but she just made it a point to avoid us that entire time. Like we were in her space, almost made us feel like we were invading her space. She didn't want to come near us. I mean, she made it very clear and adamant that she was not going to come near us, but she did serve all of the white people. But I noticed her actions, I noticed her body language, and you know when things are out of place, you can sense things. So at the end of our, you know, we sat there, we continued to, we could have gotten up and left, but we traveled far, you know, 4 hours of driving. We wanted to have something to sit down and eat. So we did, we completed our meal. And at the time when we did cash out, the manager was standing up front and he did ask us how our experience there was. And so my mother went on to explain, and she was very upset. And she just told him flat out, you know, that young lady right there refused to serve me. I'm sorry if she does not like my skin color, but if she's in a place like this where she's dealing with customers, then she needs to serve all regardless of how she feels. So he apologized up and down, and at the end result, he ended up paying our meal. But that feeling that you carry, you know, that's forever embedded in you, especially if you're a child and you really, you know, you're just thinking that the whole world is just cookies and cream when it's really not. So that was one of my experiences, and it stuck with me for quite some time. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You know, these are very, very hard conversations to have, but they are very necessary, which is why we want to have them. We want as many people as possible to participate, because a lot of times we'll when we think about racial injustice and when we think about discrimination, it becomes a black and white thing, but it's much broader than that, which is why we're here today, and we want to hear from everyone that's represented. You know, if there's a story that you witnessed, if there's a story that you actually experienced yourself personally. So, and we want to open up the floor. Please do not be hesitant to speak. So, if there's anyone else that would like to tell us about your experience, we are very open to it and invite you to do so. Yes.
Okay. Hello, my name is Alejandro Tovar. I'm from San Luis Rio, Colorado, Sonora, Mexico. 7 years ago, my mom made a decision to move to the United States looking for the American dream. The day that I was leaving my house, I remember that one person tried to tell me about racism. It was my grandma. She didn't use the word before leaving the house. I remember she told me, and she was like, Mijo, there's going to be people who will not like you. There's going to be people who just there will, maybe they don't will like to spend time with you. Maybe they will not like you. They will not like your culture. And I was like, Grandma, well, they don't know me. Once I have the opportunity to meet them, I will talk to them. I will present myself. I'm nice. I'm not a rude person. And she was like, oh, mijo, well, take care and just be aware that there's going to be people who will not like you. So I remember before getting to Colorado, we stopped in Arizona. And when we stopped in Arizona, I told my Mom, I want to walk. Like, we have been driving for a long time. I want to walk near the neighborhood. And she was like, no, mijo, don't do that. Don't go, and take your ID, be safe. And I was like, I look around, I was like, this looks a very beautiful and nice neighborhood. And she was like, just take your ID. And when I was walking in 2 blocks, I realized that in that time in Arizona, they have the Senate Bill 1017, like police officers can stop any person that they think or believe that looks illegal, immigrant. And that time I didn't know that. So when I was walking, they tried to make me aware that I should be afraid of the police officers, that I should be afraid that they will maybe stop me. And yes, they did it. I remember one police officer was like, hey, what are you doing? And I didn't speak English, so I answered in Spanish. And he was like, wait, Ben. And he asked me for my documentation. I showed him my ID, and he was like, okay, you're good. And he left. But in that moment, I was like, oh, this is what they mean when before getting out of the house, like take your ID and be safe. And just my family tried to make me aware of these things. They didn't know the words, but I remember like connecting my grandma, and I was like, well, maybe this is what my grandma says. I remember when I went to high school, I faced a lot, even in the first day that I was moving, like I said, in Arizona, I heard like maybe 3 times, back to your country. I didn't know what that means because I didn't speak English. So I was like, okay, cool. And when I get to the small town, the rural small town, I faced a lot of different discrimination in the form, like I was labeled as the immigrant student, I was labeled as the ESL student, as the migrant student, as the low income student, as the minority student. So a lot of times they didn't, like, for example, trying to go to college, nobody talked to me. And they sometimes told me like, don't waste your time, don't waste your money, just get a job in Walmart, or just get a job in this store after you graduate from high school. And I hear discrimination, even though it was a rural with a lot of population, Hispanic population, like Mexican American population or Mexican population. We were now like trying to go into other high school where there was no Latinos. We were an outlier. I remember going to other high school, they look at us. I heard that a lot of times they call me winner, they call me mojado, they call me different words. And when I started learning English, I started realizing what were the comments that they were telling me, what were the things that they told me or they say about me. In the beginning, I didn't understand, but once I started learning English, I understood all the things that they were saying about me and my culture. So in that moment, I remember I connect again what my grandma told me, like I understood that there's going to be people who will not like my culture, who will don't like me just because I have an accent, because I'm the person who I love to speak Spanish. I'm the person who I'm proud of my culture. And yeah, I just realized and I connect my grandma, like she tried to aware me and she didn't know how to use the words. But once I was in America, I realized that what she means trying to tell me that, yes, there's going to be people who would not like me just because for my skin color or just because I have an accent, even though they don't know me.
Thank you, Alejandro. Is anyone else that would like to share? Yes.
Hello, everyone. My name is Juana Garcia Riza. I'm a senior mentor here at Adams State University, and I am a cellular molecular biology major. Unlike many of the stories that we've heard today, personally, I've never experienced racism against me, and I believe that it roots from growing up in a very rural town of about 500 people where it's predominantly Hispanic and white. And so the lack of diversity has made it to a point where we say, oh, you don't see color. Oh, there's racism doesn't really exist because it doesn't happen here. And one of the things that happens for a lot of students and families within my community that go out of the valley is that they experience culture shock. They have prejudiced thoughts of other cultures, of other races, based on social media, based on what their families have told them about them. And so, and even within our own Hispanic community, I've noticed that we have certain biases where, like, for example, I say I've never experienced racism, but when I've had conversations with my friends, they're like, yeah, you've never experienced racism because your skin tone is rather light. And as compared to my parents, yeah, my skin tone is rather light and I don't have an accent because I was born in Mexico and I just don't have the accent. I never developed it as compared to my brother who does have the accent. And so it's been rather eye-opening over the years. And also when I used to go to leadership conferences, it would be predominantly white. And also because I come from a lower income status, it was really opened my eyes as to where the privilege lies within race and socioeconomic status and how those two kind of merge and blend in. And so even though my experience is not the same as other students who have spoken here, I think it is very important to acknowledge and be aware of those. Just because you don't experience racism doesn't mean that it's not there. And especially as a minority, I think that we should be aware how just doesn't just affect you, but also how it affects others within your community and how you can stand up for them as well.
Thank you. That's a great point. The floor is open. Is there anyone else that would like to share? Please, Natisha.
Good afternoon. My name is Natisha Wagner. I'm a senior at St. Aglaishka University here in Mission, South Dakota. I currently reside on the Marty Indian Reservation, the Ihanktua Yankton Sioux Tribal Reservation, an enrolled member of the Rosebud Sioux Tribe out of Rosebud, South Dakota. I was raised on the reservation there. On the Rosebud Reservation, there's 22 communities. They're like little, almost like little towns, but they're just little communities. I grew up there. I was raised there by my grandparents. I'm Sichongu Lakota and Oglala Lakota. I've traveled a lot growing up. Even today, I still experience a little racial discrimination because I wear a lot of tribal jewelry. I wear our university's coat. It has the logo on the back. I wear that with pride everywhere I go. A lot of non-natives, I've never seen a Native American before. They've never even heard of a reservation. So I'm always open to answering questions. I don't get offended, but I do get mistreated. I get odd looks sometimes because my skin is a little bit darker. So I travel a lot for like internships in the summertime before this pandemic started. And the most recent occurrence I had was about 4 years ago. And I spoke in front of maybe 500 people. And I did a Q&A after, and they were really shocked that natives were still here. They thought we were distinct. They didn't think we were still alive pretty much. They thought we lived in teepees. They thought we still rode on horses. They were very rude. But I didn't get offended. I had to educate them and remind them that, we are still here. We're still a people. We're still a nation. There's over 526 Native American tribes throughout the United States. And that doesn't include Canada. So I've had to give them a little education lesson per se and remind them, of our, what you see on TV. It's not like that in reality. they assume, you know, we're alcoholics and, you know, drug addicts. And, you know, I have to, you know, let them know, like, you know, we're just like any other race, you know, here in the country. You know, we're like anybody else. You know, we go to school, you know, we have jobs, we have families. We, you know, attend church. Some of us believe in our traditional values, our traditional beliefs, and we're not any different. So, you know, yeah, I may wear my tribal jewelry with pride. I may, you know, attend school, but that doesn't make me any less of a person than the next one sitting next to me. So I still experience that going to restaurants, even today, going to like the grocery store, going, you know, shopping, or, you know, just out and about doing my casual business. I will get, you know, stares and glares, but, you know, I just smile and, you know, treat everyone the way I would like to be treated. And unfortunately, it's like that with every race. But I think it's a lot more common now. A lot of us still experience that today. And that would be my most recent experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Is there anyone else that would like to share?
Hi, I have like really short story. My name's Juana Rodriguez. I'm studying business administration, emphasis in marketing at Adams State University. And I very much like Marlene, I can say I haven't experienced much racial discrimination. The only experience that can come up to my mind is when I was in preschool. I was starting in this town, they had their own preschool. And when I went there, I was one of the few students to have a very like Hispanic sounding name. And so my preschool teacher kept trying to like Americanize it, I guess, like changing it from Juana to Jenny to Joanna to Jonas, like, you know, trying to find a more American version of it. Janet, she even tried Janet. And I'd get mad. I was a 5-year-old. I'd be like, no, my name's Juana. And so finally, like, I think like 2 years, we came to a compromise and we settled on Juanita. And for the longest time, that was my name. So going into kindergarten, my parents actually transferred me to a different school. And that school was the one who, with the years, told me, well, what's your actual real name? And once I told them it's Juana Maria Rodriguez Tarango, they were like, take it back. Use your name. That's your name. And yeah, you know, that's really happy and very blessed to have a very supportive small school.
Awesome. Thank you. Is there anyone else?
So, Dr. Smith, a new question to ask the group would be, what approaches should we consider together to increase racial justice? If anyone would like to answer that question.
I'll dive in on some of it. I think one thing that would help is like a lot of times people aren't they aren't as willing to accept other people's cultures or even learn about them. You know, just learning about different people's experiences and like different parts of their culture, I think really helps us all, you know, not see each other as so different, but you know, see each other as, you know, we're alike in so many ways, no matter what we look like, you know, no matter, you know, how we may sound. And I just believe that, you know, just really wanting to learn and, you know, actually trying to figure out, you know, and trying to accept the different things that we all have, you know, in common and that we all, you know, have different. I think that would be a really, really big help in trying to, you know, maybe correct some of these, you know, years of, you know, social injustice.
Excellent, Amber. Thank you. Would anyone else like to comment? Absolutely.
So I thought maybe educating our uprising teachers and modifying the curriculum on racial injustices over the years for several races and several communities. So for example, there's growing up, we, at least for in my experience, we grew up knowing that, oh, the Pilgrims came over, to the United States, or Columbus came over to the United States, and the Native Americans were very welcoming, and they basically became friends over time. And we know now that's totally not what happened. And so I think upgrading our curriculums in our K through 12 programs would be a great start, because it honestly starts when children are very young. And we basically grow up with these misconceptions of how race over the years has basically developed. And so, yeah, I believe that updating our curriculums for our professors and knowing which words and how to teach particular groups of students depending on their age would be a good idea.
I love that suggestion. I mean, there comes a time when you just have to tell the truth. And then telling the truth, it makes you free. And I think that's where we need to go as American citizens. We really need to tell the truth. And in doing so through education, it will make a difference, I think. Dr. Jackson, did you have another question? I'm sorry, Sarah? Sarah, did you?
I do. So as someone, you know, that I haven't been discriminated against because of my skin, but I have faced, you know, feeling alone because of my differences. And I grew up in a small town where it was predominantly white, but after I moved out of that small town and graduated from my high school, I experienced real world. And, you know, getting out there and exposing yourself to a world that is full of so many beautiful people and so many beautiful differences is key. And I've learned that the most important aspect that I found is to listen and to open your ears and to open your heart to people that are different than you, people that are similar to you, and everything else in between. And I think that that's been so important for me to, you know, to listen to understand, not to listen to speak and to respond, but to truly listen to understand others and to listen to accept others for their differences, and to, you know, remind everyone around you that, you know, what makes you you is what makes you unique. And that is the coolest part about everybody's differences. And although I've never experienced racism as in terms of my skin tone, I acknowledge that it's out there, and I acknowledge that it needs to be, you know, given a voice, and that there has to be allies for people across the entire nation and across the world. And I've, you know, taken it upon myself to really make it part of my passion to be a voice for those that feel alone, and to voice equity, not just equality, but equity across the entire nation. And so that's just really what I focus on. And I bring a different perspective to the table here. And I just absolutely adore this conversation. And I think that it's really important to have, and it's a necessity, and we need to do it more often.
Thank you, Sarah.
All right, our next question is, do you see any positive examples or role models of racial healing?
As far as racial healing, I believe everything starts with effort. I've seen police, well, since the brutality, as far as Trayvon Martin starting at that, well, that's as far as I can remember, and going up all the way to until now, I have seen police try their best to communicate with the community, try their best to go out and have fun, play basketball, and things like that. But as mentioned before by Ms. Dr. Smith, many things in America is hidden, and we've seen it through this presidential election. Not to take it that far, but we've seen it. So there is effort, but there's only like 15% effort being put forth to changing the inequalities within America that I've seen. And statistics could show that as well. So, but there has been effort, but I believe there's always room for improvement. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll go next. As far as the racial healing, as Miss, and please tell me if I get this correct, Ariza. Okay, as Ms. Ariza said, I think it goes into the teaching of history before we can start healing, and it has to, like, the whole truth has to be told, not like the sugar-coated version, the condensed version. Like, you have to actually acknowledge everything that happened, the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it, because even with slavery and things in textbooks in schools, it's like basically a sugar-coated version of slavery. We know that, Black people were brought over here and had to work for, no pay, and were treated badly. Some were lynched, some were whipped, all of this, but it's so much deeper. We know that Black Wall Street, they burned down Black Wall Street, but do we know that they killed off almost the whole town of Black people? They don't teach you that. So I think healing comes with acknowledging and accepting first, and then you can start working towards healing, because you can't heal something that nobody is willing to tell the truth about.
Absolutely. In order to heal a sore, you have to clean it out first, and then the healing begins. Yes, yes, Ashante.
I also feel like healing, it begins with ourselves, taking a look at ourselves, and because I feel like as grown individuals, a lot of this should not be going on, because when you're older, you know better, and some kids are these things. They're taught hate. They're taught to look at a specific person a specific way. But once you're older and you depart from that, you have your own mind. You have your own, your morals and your values and things of that sort. So we should be taking a look within ourselves and be open-minded and be willing to accept everyone for who they are, because like Sarah said, being unique is what being yourself is what make you unique. Being different is what make us unique. We all can't be the same, and that's what make the world so beautiful. We're all different. So healing, it has to begin with us. We have to look at ourselves and you know be what we want to see in other people. We want people to treat us fairly and correct, and we should do the same.
I want to jump in. I think the unfortunate thing is that a lot of times the expectation of racial healing falls on Black people, who are often the ones that are being treated in such a way that is projected by most white folks in this country. And I think it's also a point to mention that when we talk about racial healing, I think the question that has to come about that is, what exactly are we healing? And I think that there's so many different layers to that, so many intersections to it as well, because of course we could all talk about academia and education, but the reality there is, so many different disparities that fall amongst Black people and brown people in this country. And so, when we think about any positive examples or role models, I mean, there are plenty of Black people, Black and brown people, who are on the front lines of activism and organizing and mobilizing folks to try and change the makeup of this country. But the reality of it is, we are oftentimes the ones working 10 times harder than the folks who brought us here. Then also having to recognize the foundation of which America was built upon, which is white supremacy, racism, and oppression. And so I think it's somewhat faulty, when we have these conversations at times, to ask us what racial healing is supposed to look like, when this is something that we're experiencing and trying to combat each and every day. I think it's also unfortunate that in a country where I think my brother up here, where is he? I'm trying to find his picture. But either way, he talked about what his grandmother told him before he came here to America. Alejandro, there he is. And so when you talk about this American dream, you often wonder who the dream is set for. And of course, you often think about the limited amount of access that has been given to white people in this country. And then you wonder why folks who often want to come to America to experience this thing that has often been sold, whether that's on television or through the media, and then they get here and are treated so badly and poorly. And so I think that, to the question, I don't necessarily know from who you I guess should think that we should be looking at when it comes to the role models of racial healing, because America hasn't healed it all from racism. So I don't necessarily think there are any good models for us to be looking at this time. There are plenty of great activists and organizers that we all can look up to, who've tried to do generational work to make sure that there's an impact that's sustainable for the next generation to come along. But all of us have some sort of commitment to this, and making sure that we can do what we can in one generation to try and combat all the things that we're fighting for.
Marquise, thank you. I must admit, in all transparency, Marquise, I believe you're a Tougaloo student, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, it's because of students like you that I fell in love with Tougaloo more than 30 years ago. Thank you so much. Let me ask this: I don't know if there are any parents in the group or not, but a lot of people in America don't realize what it means when we say that we have to have the talk with our children before they go out to drive, before they go out into the community. Have you all ever experienced having that talk with your parents? Did your parents have that talk with you? And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I can explain it as well. Are you all familiar with the talk? Okay, excellent. I see all heads are nodding. And for those of you all who may not be familiar with it, it's a simple conversation you have with your children before they drive. How they are to act if they're pulled over by a policeman. How they are to act if they're stopped by a policeman, because we don't have the luxury of just sending our children out the doors and knowing that they'll come back home safely. And there are minor things like that other communities don't realize that's taking place, that they never have to deal with. And because we have to deal with it, it becomes a natural natural act for us. So there are so many things that people just take for granted for lack of education. And these conversations are the hard conversations again, but they must be had. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on the last subject? Juan, have you had any experiences?
Yes, can I go?
Absolutely, please.
All right, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Juan Calixto, and I'm originally from Guatemala. I was 17 when I arrived to the country, so basically I've been living here like about 8 years from now. Before coming to the country, I actually already experienced racism in Guatemala because being an indigenous Maya. However, before coming to the country, to the US, I thought that racism and inequality wouldn't exist here. However, now that I've been living here for 8 years, like I realized that I think there is more racism and inequality in this country compared to other countries around the world. I've been living in 3 countries, Guatemala, Mexico, and the US, and I'm not trying to criticize the US. It's just, I love living here. However, there's a lot of social issues going on right in this country that I ever experienced. And I think educating this generation about the many social issues that we're facing might motivate like individual who will be our next mentor, next educators, next president, and maybe start making real changes that will impact not the lives of one race, but all the races, specifically minorities.
Thank you, Juan. Are there any other comments before
Dr.
the next
Smith,
question?
we have another question.
Okay.
How can young people take the lead on a movement toward inclusion and equity?
Yes, Sarah.
My answer to that is going to be to get involved and to use your voice for the betterment of not only yourself, but for students around you. Because in terms of equity, I mean, that's really it in a nutshell, is thinking of others around you and how you can provide an opportunity for everybody to not only have the same opportunity, but to have the same starting place and the same, help to get there, and to provide those students with the opportunities to be successful and ensure that success. And I think that it all comes down to holding your community accountable and to really being that person and that, advocate for equity and to really take the lead in your campus community, starting small, but to also be that person in everyday life. Because as soon as we start holding our communities accountable, but going back to that last question, I mean, there's positive examples, but as Marquise touched on, you know, there's still racism existent. So there hasn't been a, you know, one-stop shop as far as, you know, somebody who has been the difference and made the change. I think that it's our country that is accountable, and it's our citizens and every single person around us that, you know, can make the change and make the movement towards inclusion and equity. But I believe it all starts with each and every one of us.
Thank you, Sarah.
Hi.
Hi, Cassandra.
Yeah, my name is Cassandra Artichoker, and I'm with Sinte Gleshka University. I've grown up on the Rosebud Reservation my entire life. And just to answer this question, I just want to bring to attention that CNN recently, yesterday, whenever they were showing the different races who was voting, they included us as something else. They didn't even have Native Americans included in there. So I think, you know, educating and inclusion and ways that maybe we can, like young people, I know for myself, I kind of have a TikTok platform, and on there every day it's like trying to educate people. And I think that's a really good tool that young people have, is social media, that, you know, we can, I know people on my videos have said, you know, before I was watching your TikToks or other Native people's TikToks, that I didn't know this. Like I'm learning more from TikTok than I have in, you know, history books and history classes in school. So I think going back to education, I just think that's something that's really important.
Thank you. Yes.
I will say to teach young people that they have a voice, that their voice is powerful, that they should embrace their culture, they should embrace their skin, they should embrace their roots, and be proud and speak loud, because they have a powerful voice. A lot of times I think having representation, it helps in the perspective, like when I was trying to like going to college or trying to be involved, I didn't know like there were people like me in other positions. I didn't know there were people like going to college. I thought like I was there were no people like, oh, being first generation college students, or there was no people like who were migrant or seasonal farm worker background. So knowing and representing and seeing people who represent you, like that motivates you, and that motivates me, like, yes, if they can do it, I can do it. And also, again, I completely agree, like through education and showing the students their history and embracing that, like, yes, this happened. Because a lot of times when I'm in the South area of the United States, in Arizona, California, New Mexico, I hear a lot of times they speak English, and I'm like, this, we didn't cross the border crossed us. So here Spanish was speak before English, so why do I need to speak English? So if I feel confident, this is my language, this is my mother language, and I feel confident speaking this language. So getting back, teach young kids that they have a voice and they have rights, and they should use the voice and speak loud and never be quiet. And yeah, I don't know if someone wants to add something.
Awesome, awesome. Marlena.
Hello, I wanted to also mention, what kind of following up on what Cassandra said earlier. My little sister, who's just 11, she likes to look at TikToks, and the information that she has gotten through TikTok is much more vast and diverse about racial and social issues than I had when I was exactly her age. And so it does work. And because the platform on TikTok is rather trendy, especially with our young people, whether that's from children to teenagers to even adults, it's a platform that is very powerful, and we should be looking more into it. And it's also rather easy to use as well, but also we should also be teaching and encouraging students on using their voice, like Alejandro said, because there's so much power into what their stories have to tell. But also we need to encourage students to advocate those stories into the congressional level, because even though right now we are working towards against racial injustice at the bottom level, really what's going to work for us is if we go all the way to the top of government, at the government level, because that's where laws are going to be put in place in order to protect our people. And I worked as a congressional intern back in 2019, and being a liaison between the representative I worked for and its constituents, I can say that yes, you do have a voice, and your voice is being heard. But the thing is, not a lot of people are using that voice to advocate. So we need to encourage our students to use their voice in congressional and governmental spaces.
Thank you.
We have about 3 minutes left for comments before the closing comments.
I just wanted to add, young people have been at the forefront of every movement in this country. We can often reflect on the life of the late Congressman John Lewis, who was an extraordinary leader, activist, and then turned policy writer and elected official. And when you look at his life, just recently, of course, he had one last video that he decided that he wanted to put out after his death, which was still talking about the importance of the vote and voting. But the point that I'm making is, John Lewis was really on the ground heavy in the 1960s, where he was, marching on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, not because they were on their way to go vote, but because they were trying to get access to vote. And so I think that when we talk about a movement towards inclusion and equity, I mean, inclusion and equity is there. We see white people have it. The part that I think is missing is access for Black and Brown people to also gain that same inclusion and equity that we often either idealize about or talk about in these conversations. But I think what needs to happen is, we have this network here of young people from across the country who are brilliant minds and scholars who have been able to impact this discussion. And I think that there has to be some form of action after this, because unfortunately, I know that a number of us on this call could agree and relate. We're often invited to have these conversations, but this is our life. Most of us have been Black or brown all of our lives and have had these experiences. And so I think it's important for us to be able to have actionable steps so that we can have a sustainable long-term movement towards this idea that we're bringing the conversation towards.
Thank you, Marquise. Before we bring this to a close, Mr. Dobbs, is there anything that you'd like to speak on? I think we would be 100% if you were to give us a statement.
Thank you. I would just like to say if we could come together as young people and start a campaign on social media, not necessarily one, but if we could come together and share our voices and our different experiences that we have, we could show the world more of ourselves. We could learn more all together about injustices, and it would help bring everyone together. And I feel like it would help with equity.
Thank you, sir. Mr. President, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. Thank you, Dr. Jackson. Speechless is not somewhere that anybody who knows me would think that I find myself very often. But after listening to what you all shared today, I'm humbled at the idea of getting to have the closing remark, because as Mr. Hunt said, young people have been in the leadership role of most every movement in history that has ever been important. And you've done something here today. You did what I asked you to do. You did what all of the so-called leaders of our nation and world have failed at doing. You had a very civil conversation with each other about a very inherent dignity and worth of every individual on this call. So what it tells me is that my generation fairly quickly needs to get out of the way and let your generation take over the leadership of the of the world. You know, I want to thank our moderators. I want to thank the presidents of the other institutions and the moderators from each of the institutions. But mostly, I want to thank the amazing group of students who just began to share your thoughts with us here today. And I know that Betty Knighton of the National Issues Forums, and I'm guessing that the Kettering Foundation, who is listening, will want to continue this very important dialogue across our campuses in meaningful ways as we move forward. I also want to tell you that about 100 leaders in the civil rights movement and education and business and industry have been texting me all through your conversation, listening in from YouTube, from every corner of the world, almost, the delegates to the National Institutes for Historically Underserved Students. And they're just as struck by what you have accomplished here today as I am. There's a song that says, I want to see you be brave. And wow, I have seen you be brave today by sharing things that are personal and intimate and difficult to share, and doing it with such grace. So I thank you all very much. We have more sessions tomorrow and the next day, but I dare say all will pale by comparison to what this group of young voices accomplished here today. And with that, Dr. Jackson, I'm going to turn it over to you to end our session for the day.
Yes, thank you all for attending, and do know that in the agenda that was sent to you in your email, you can tune into other sessions that are tomorrow and on Saturday. So thank you again. It was a great session.
Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.